President Trump has escalated his calls to deploy the National Guard to America's cities under the guise of cracking down on crime and immigration. One city with which he is obsessed is Portland, Oregon. On September 27th, he announced on his Truth Social site, quote, "I am directing the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, to provide all necessary troops to protect war-ravaged Portland and any of our ICE facilities under siege from attack by Antifa and other domestic terrorists. I'm also authorizing full force if necessary," end quote. Not quite sure what full force means. City and state officials in Portland rejected the president's announcement that same day.
There is no insurrection. There is no threat to national security, and there is no need for military troops in our major city. People are shopping. People are going to the farmers markets or at the Saturday market. Portland's doing just fine.
When Trump ordered National Guard troops to the streets of Portland, both Oregon and California, whose National Guard troops were also called by Trump to go to Portland, sued to stop him. The case went before U.S. District Judge Karen Immergut, a Trump appointee who temporarily blocked the Guard's deployment in Oregon. In her 31-page order, the judge wrote, quote, "The president's determination was simply untethered to the facts." She went on to say, quote, "Furthermore, this country has a long-standing and foundational tradition of resistance to government overreach, especially in the form of military intrusion into civil affairs. This is a nation of constitutional law, not martial law. Defendants have made a range of arguments that, if accepted, risk blurring the line between civil and military federal power to the detriment of this nation," end quote. It's a Trump-appointed judge. Trump appealed, and the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit granted an administrative stay to the decision, allowing the president to federalize Oregon's National Guard, but still barred him from deploying the troops to Portland. On Thursday, the Ninth Circuit heard oral arguments, with all eyes now on what that three-judge panel will do next. Joining me now is Dan Rayfield, the Attorney General of Oregon, and Nicholas Kristof, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist with the New York Times and author of Chasing Hope, A Reporter's Life. Good morning to both of you, gentlemen. Thank you for being with us. Attorney General Rayfield, there are a number of legal arguments. We compressed that into, an opening, but there's a number of things to follow here. First of all, can you clarify what the appeals court stay means? Allowing Trump to federalize but not deploy the National Guard. What does that mean?
Yeah, it's kind of this middle ground, right, where they said, hey, you can keep the National Guard under the control of the president. However, you just can't move those troops into the city of Portland, right? You can't deploy them into the city, which effectively, was a win for us as we thought about this. But we still have a lot more ground to cover, in court to make sure that the president doesn't normalize the use of military troops in our cities.
Nicholas, I've spent a good amount of time in Portland, not as much as you have. You grew up in Oregon, not too far from Portland. It's a great place. You spent a lot of time there. You wrote a recent piece for the New York Times. A couple of things people who are not from Portland should probably understand. This is one of those cities in America that has a proud tradition of protest. They like their protest. They're actually pretty creative about it. And they get into protests. But it's not this coloring of it as some kind of a war zone is just not true.
Absolutely, Ali. Look, two things can be true at the same time. One, Portland has real challenges. There is a real problem with crime, with drug use, with commercial vacancies, with homelessness. Yeah. And there have been skirmishes in front of the ICE facility, especially back in June. But it's also true that it's absurd for Trump to call this a war-ravaged city, to say that it's full of insurrectionists. There are the protest today is going to be in the form of a naked bike ride, which kind of reflects what kind of a war zone this supposedly is. As Judge Immergut said, the president's words are simply untethered from the facts.
Attorney General, I had a conversation with Zach Beecham a little while ago about this concept of not just federalizing Guard troops, but sending them from states to other states. That's been done in the cases of like hurricanes and national disasters where a government asks for help because the population doesn't support enough National Guard members. But now we've got California involved. Texas is involved, though they're not suing to avoid it. How does everybody get involved in this?
Well, I mean, this is what the president is doing right now. He gets told he can't use the Oregon National Guard, so he tries to use the California National Guard. He gets told he can't use the California National Guard, so he tries to go use the Texas National Guard. It's an incredibly cute way to kind of maneuver around the court, and the court wasn't having it. But it really sets up this dangerous precedent where you start using the military, the National Guard of different states, and deploying them against a different state's will into their state. It's a very dangerous precedent. And you got to remember, right? Oregon's a city and Portland's a city where we are reducing crime since the beginning of the year. I mean, it's a 51% reduction in violent crime in Oregon. We don't even rank anywhere near the close when it comes to other states or other cities when it comes to crime in our state. So when you look at those dynamics, those are actually untethered from what the president needs to deploy the military. So this is what people need to remember. Got to have an invasion, not one going on in Oregon. You got to have a rebellion or a threat of a rebellion. Think about that. No rebellion going on in Oregon, or the president has to be unable to effectuate the laws of the United States, and none of those conditions exist, right? And so the things that he's talking about, public safety, those are things that you have your police agencies working on, your sheriff's department, your Oregon State Police, your district attorney, not the United States military. It's very bizarre right now.
So you've pointed this out, Nicholas, in your article. I want to go back to it, in which you write, if Trump wanted to help Portland deal with its challenges, there are many ways he could do so with the $10 million that was the estimated cost of his deployment of the Oregon National Guard. He could help with treatment for substance abuse, with emergency housing, with education. But the worry here in Portland is that troops won't address any of the city's actual challenges and will instead provoke unrest. This is the same story for Washington, D.C., for any of these other cities. They got problems, but they're mostly municipal or state policy problems or policing issues. But this business of provoking unrest seems to be key here. Donald Trump's been carrying on about Portland, Oregon since his first term. He wants it to be the example of the place where he goes there and provokes something to happen, which justifies the addition of troops to the mix.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. And frankly, in our minds as Oregonians is the fact that in 2020, the George Floyd protests were diminishing in Portland. They were on the decline. And then President Trump sent in federal troops. And the upshot was that those protests magnified and became more serious and did become more violent. And frankly, there were protesters who fell into Trump's trap and created this narrative of an out-of-control Portland that he was trying to foment. And, I think this time Oregonians are determined not to fall in that trap again. The emphasis of Mayor Keith Wilson and others has been, don't take the bait. And, that's one reason why you see all these animal costumes. I think there's a real determination to mock President Trump's silliness, but not to let this degenerate into violence.
Yeah, the animal costumes are fantastic. We're showing you some of them right now. Attorney General, two issues. One is, and the leaders in Illinois have been making this point, too, that you just made about the legality, what the Insurrection Act is meant for, what it's not meant for. You've also said that it's important for us to, quote, recognize the moment we're in and see what he's doing, he being Donald Trump. What is that message to everybody else? Not people in Illinois, not Oregon, but to everybody. Recognize what is happening here.
What I think people need to do is pause, take a deep breath, and look at all of the things that the president's doing. He is attacking an independent judiciary, right? When he doesn't like a ruling, he'll sit there and talk about impeaching our judges. Having an independent judiciary is a foundation, a hallmark of an effective democracy. He's attacking the free press and using fear to intimidate people in their speech. That is unconstitutional, and it is not American. He is deploying troops in California, D.C., Memphis, Illinois, Oregon, normalizing the use of the United States military. There's a reason we don't have the military in the streets in America, and the reason it's normal in third world countries. And there are laws against it, and he's going against those things. So you have these attacks on the pillars of our democracy right now. He's the president that leads through fear. His own party won't even stand up to him. So it's a very dangerous time here in America, and I think we have to recognize what this president is doing. And then that's why you have Democratic attorneys general across this country drawing the line in the sand and saying, no, you can't do this. This is not America. The things that are going on are un-American. And just like those blow-up frogs that we're seeing outside this ice facility, we as Americans can't be that frog in boiling water. We have to make sure that we're giving voice to these, what I would say is very un-American, unconstitutional actions that this president is taking right now.
Thanks to both you gentlemen. Dan Rayfield is the Attorney General for the state of Oregon. Nicholas Kristof is an award-winning New York Times columnist.